Welcome back, everybody. It's 12:30 in Eastern Time Zone, 1:30 in PEI, and that would make it 2 o'clock in Newfoundland. So thanks for coming back on time. We're now going into our last panel entitled Unleashing Agri-Food's Potential Path Forward, the Downstream Stakeholders' Perspective. I'm now going to introduce our panel moderator and sponsor, Randy White, President of Sysco Canada. Over to you, Randy.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be here today. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great conference and the CFA virtual conference. And I actually was in a few conferences earlier this week, so hopefully I can keep this one moving as well as the others. But it's great to be with all of you in these interesting times. And as mentioned, my name is Randy White. I'm the president of Sysco Canada, and we are Canada's largest food service distribution company. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I do want to introduce our topic today and a few folks that are with me on the virtual stage. Our panel is with you today to talk about unleashing, as Mary said, unleashing Agri-Food's potential path forward and the downstream stakeholders' perspective. And I can assure you we have a lot of perspective to share with you today. So hopefully you've got lots of questions and thoughts to bring back to us. I will start off by saying that the pandemic, the COVID-19 period, which is coming up on a year for all of us, has forced so many Canadian businesses to adapt their ways in reaching Canadians. And the agri-food sector is no different. In fact, it's probably one of the more heated up areas for this activity. With the shutdown of the food service sector throughout a large part of 2020, the closures of processing plants to mitigate and spread COVID-19 to grocery retailers needing to ensure that their customers can shop safely, the pandemic has led the agri-food sector to reimagine how they conduct their business. And we've all seen it. We've seen it in the media. We've seen it in the news. It's been quite remarkable to watch. So with me, our panelists, as well as myself, will speak to these challenges through the pandemic and how the various sectors have been evolving, what changes we have made to cope with these challenges, and also provide a perspective on how our sectors will emerge from the pandemic and successfully conduct business into the future. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. And first of all, our first panelist with me on the stage here is Carla Ventin. Carla is Senior Vice President, Government Relations, Food, Health and Consumer Products of Canada. And Carla will be speaking on this important topic with us. Next, we also have our next panelist, Gary Sands, who's Senior Vice President, Government Relations with the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. And Gary as well will be speaking and addressing these important matters as we work through this. Now, what we will be doing today is each one of us will take a few minutes and we will be presenting to you thoughts and comments regarding the topic. I will begin, Carla will go second, and Gary will follow up. And once the three of us have shared our thoughts and comments, I will then walk you through the Q&A process a little bit further. But what we'd like to encourage is, as we're presenting, you can go into your question box and you can submit questions to us. And what we will do is, once the three of us have spoken, we will then address your questions at the end of the front end portion of our event today. And I will say this, that we do have Matt Houston of the CFA who will actually share the questions verbally to us in English, and then of course we have an interpreter who will interpret the questions in French and make sure they're shared as well back to all of us. Okay, so how does that sound? Well, with that, I will start off, and I have a brief presentation, and I would like to share some comments about our very exciting food service industry. As noted earlier, I'm Randy White. I'm the president of Sysco Canada, and I do want to explain what Sysco is. It is interesting. Most people don't know who we are or what we do unless you're in the restaurant industry, and it's quite common. Often people will ask me, where do you work? I say Sysco, and they think we're with the IT organization that creates network controllers and whatnot, and that's Sysco with a C, and we are Sysco with an S. But you have seen our trucks around in every city in North America and many parts of the world. We are a marketing and supply chain company servicing the food service industry. And we're a public company. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And we're the largest of our kind in the world. And that includes in the US and Canada in particular. And as the president of Sysco Canada, I'm very proud of our industry, particularly now. We are an organization that has large distribution centers in most cities in North America and, of course, other parts of the world. But basically what we do is we supply food and food-related products to anywhere where food is consumed away from home. And we call that the food away from home channel. And this is mainly restaurants, resorts, hotels, conference centers, institutions such as universities, schools, acute care hospitals, seniors living, healthcare, and on and on and on. And I will say this, that the core of our industry is the single location independent restaurant all the way to multinational, multi-unit chain restaurants, some of the biggest in the world. And as you look at our statistics, you can see we have some interesting numbers. We have over 47,000 items offered up through our network across Canada, over 4,600 brands that we market and distribute. We employ over 3,700 employees at 17 locations across Canada. And we have over 600 trucks on the road delivering every single day of the week. We also deliver all day long and all night long, and ensure that products are continuing to move through our industry. And we drive through every community in Canada where food is consumed away from home. And that is an extensive part of our business. I do also want to mention, if you can move to the next slide, we are the largest of our industry, as I mentioned. But we're not just a food distribution logistics company. We actually do more than just distribute food. We have hundreds of talented food experts providing highly personalized service to the restaurateur, to the food industry operator. And within that, we have best-in-class resources, best-in-class technology, and more than anything, we provide consulting and ideas on where the industry is going so our restaurants can adapt and keep up and keep ahead of their competition. Now, I will say this, for our topic today, like many during the pandemic, the food service industry story has been a tough one. All of you have heard it, with restaurants being forced to close or provide only patio service in the summer months or takeout and delivery. Our customers have been hit very hard. And from the start of the pandemic right up until today, restaurants in particular have been singled out and forced to close or operate at a very small level. And I will say this, not everybody understands this, but most restaurants, if not almost all restaurants, they just simply cannot run this way for the long run. Takeout and delivery, patio business, it's not enough to pay the bills. And so most restaurant owners over this last year have been forced to go into their life savings and liquidate their life savings. Yes, there's been some government support, but it simply has not been enough to avoid having to liquidate their savings. When you look back at our industry during the pandemic, you know, there's one thing we have learned across our industry, and we learned it very quickly in the first few months, is that most Canadians and all governments at all levels, whether it's local, provincial, or federal, they just simply do not understand the role that food service plays in feeding Canadians. And this is an important point of distinction here I wanted to share with you, that one of the significant reasons that we all saw the food shortages in April, May, and June of last year at the beginning of the pandemic wasn't because there wasn't enough food. It was because the shift in consumption completely away from food service, literally within 7 days, went completely into grocery. And I had $4 billion worth of inventory, and my competitors in our space had their inventory, and nobody wanted our products because nobody was going into a restaurant. University students were not going to university and having lunch in their cafeterias. High school students were not going into their cafeterias. All of us were working from home. We weren't going downtown and going out for lunch or grabbing a coffee and a bagel on the way to the office. All of that completely stopped. And this is what really created the shortages initially. and grocery had to backpedal for several months to catch up. And it's quite staggering. And it's important to understand that almost 40% of Canadians consume their nourishment in a food away from home establishment. And that's an important distinction. The closure of restaurants, hotels, university schools, and on, and the big one of all is that we cannot continue to operate this way. And I do want to stress, as we think about government influence here, for whatever reasons, restaurants have been singled out and have been forced to close. And this has been so tough on our industry. And we simply provide the safest place to consume food, yet we've been singled out as a place of perhaps risk. And it's been really tough on our industry. So as we think about this, we've learned a lot as an industry. And if you could go to the next slide. At Sysco Canada, very early on in the pandemic, we stepped up and we felt our industry needed to be heard. We started the Foodies Unite campaign. And with that, we stood up to rally our industry and more than anything, become a voice for our industry across Canada. Next slide. Within the Foodies Unite initiative, we provide several programs, and we pivoted very quickly during the pandemic. And most of these continue to this day. We help restaurants stand up a delivery and takeout program. Whether you know this or not, many restaurants have never had a takeout program or a delivery program. Think of some of the steakhouses in some of the cities you're in. And typically, you don't order a steak online and have it delivered to your home, but people are doing that today. And we provided the infrastructure, the system, the packaging, and the ideas to make that happen. We also provided pop-up shop kits for restaurants to open their dining rooms as a retail grocer of restaurant supplies to the community when there was food shortages. And we did this in many, many parts of Canada, and it continues to this day. Particularly successful in some of the rural communities. Some of you may know of this, where your favorite restaurant is selling cases of bathroom tissue, paper towel, Sysco steaks, and whatnot. And it's been very successful helping our restaurants to generate revenue to keep them open during the pandemic. We also, when grocery store demand was skyrocketing, we opened up what we call our Sysco at Home initiative, and it's a home delivery grocery initiative for restaurant products directly to your home. And this has been highly successful for us, and we continue this one for this day, or to this day. We also saw many less fortunate communities struggle to find food supplies during the pandemic. We saw a significant gap develop very early on in the supply chain to Indigenous communities across Greater Canada and the northern communities of Canada. So we stepped up to make sense of this gap, and we are now supplying many Indigenous communities with food products directly from Sysco. And they're in communities we already distribute through when we're going to resource camps and whatnot, and we simply have added these communities to our network. But the grocery industry couldn't keep up to these communities, and they were falling short of nourishment during the pandemic, early days of the pandemic. We also stepped up to donate millions of meals, and we continue to do this, over 50 million meals across North America, 6.2 million in Canada alone, and we continue to do that throughout the pandemic. And now, as we think about where we're at here in February and going into the vaccine time, hopefully vaccines flow sooner than later, we are working with our customers now because we anticipate what we're calling the snapback of the restaurant industry. There's an enormous amount of dollars being saved by Canadians today. And when restaurants open up, when travel opens up again, we anticipate there's going to be a very, very eager customer to come out and dine again in restaurants and spend money. Contrary to what economics would suggest is the possibility here with our financial situation overall in terms of our country. But we're calling our snapback focus now. It's really a savior for our restaurants and our customers going forward. Next slide. During the pandemic, it was very interesting to see some other shifts and many new ideas emerge from our customers and from the marketplace. But online ordering, of course, we've all done it during the pandemic, but it went from a very small statistic to a main statistic, and there's no going back. We do suspect or project that the delivery app industry will continue to blossom going forward, and we do suspect that coming out of this, that there will be a significant amount of home delivery restaurant meals continuing on, even though consumers can get back into restaurants. We also have seen the idea of the ghost kitchen become a reality with many of our customers across different parts of North America and other parts of the world. And what that is a restaurant group that might have 5 or 6 brands that they operate in real restaurants today are now opening up simply a kitchen where they sell home delivery from their brands out of that one kitchen. And it's quite a shift that's taking place, and we're seeing more and more of that. We also have seen the restaurant branded meal kit become a very, very popular hit item. And we're seeing that in many parts of Canada. So really exciting things emerging. And a lot of these things were born with our customers working hard on survival through the pandemic. And our next slide. Another area we're seeing, if you could, yes, thank you, is a real surge in demand for made in Canada products. And this has been quietly percolating for a few years, but the pandemic has really shot this to the moon. And, we can start off by saying our government needs to figure out how we can produce vaccines in Canada after this pandemic is over into the future. I think we all agree with that. There's another big category called PPE, or personal protective equipment, that needs to be manufactured in Canada. We all learned very quickly that it's not, and we had to bring a lot of these products in from out of the country offshore. The quality of these products need to be regulated, and the authenticity of these products need to be regulated. But those are two areas. But more importantly, we are seeing our customers look for solutions in made in Canada products more than ever before. And this is where I point to you at our conference here. We have such an opportunity in Canada to meet that demand going forward, and I'm very excited about that. Next slide. So as we look to the future, and I'll wrap up here, we certainly anticipate the vaccines coming forward will change the way we're operating as a business. And certainly our customers have many brighter days ahead. I'm very optimistic about the food service industry. We are anticipating a good snapback. And at Sysco, we will do everything we can to step up and help our customers through the pandemic and get back on their feet. And so to all of you, I encourage you to get out and order takeout, do some curbside pickup. And when your favorite restaurant opens up, please get out and support your restaurant industry going forward. They need your help, and certainly we want them to be around for many decades and generations to come. So with that, for any of you that have questions for me, if you could submit those in the chat box and question box, and we'll address those at the end. And at this point, I would like to now pass the virtual stage over to Carla Ventin, and Carla will take us through her comments and presentation.
Great, thanks so much, and I want to thank also CFA. It's always great working with CFA. I particularly enjoy working with Mary and team, and I think that together we get a lot done in Ottawa and across the country. So just a bit of my background. I have been working in the agri-food sector for quite some time, both in the political world as a consultant for both the crop input sector, farm groups, and for more than a decade now on the value-added side for food manufacturers. Just on the next slide there, I highlight some of our member companies for those who are not familiar with us. We represent companies that manufacture and distribute the majority of food, health, and consumer goods found on store shelves, in restaurants, and in people's homes. And so we, our member companies make not only food products, but also a lot of those products that you depended on, and during COVID, especially in the drugstore, including, you know, disinfectants or paper products, soap, shampoo, over-the-counters, natural health products, etc. But you'll recognize a lot of these brands. They've been trusted, a lot of them, for over 100 years. And we hope that many of you have them in your homes as well. And in the next slide, just some more, or second slide there in our membership, you'll see that we do represent small and large companies, very diverse membership. And also there's some small companies in there that you may not recognize, but they do provide the product for the larger brands that you probably buy on store shelves. On the next slide here, I just wanted to comment on kind of our sector's economic footprint in Canada. We are the largest source of manufacturing jobs in the country, and the overall top employer in rural Canada. And this is really important in providing that link to urban and rural communities, and providing that important market to farmers. And it's also worthwhile to note that our member company facilities are located in urban and rural areas, and also every region of the country, which really makes us a very unique manufacturing sector. Unlike some manufacturing sectors like aerospace, based in Quebec, or auto, primarily based in Ontario and others, we actually have reach right across the country, so we are unique. What's interesting as well is that I think it really is important for all of us to work together to continue to create economic opportunity for those living in rural areas, and also attract Canadians and give them a reason to live in rural Canada, as we see the stats that more and more Canadians are leaving the countryside. And on the next slide, our contribution to the food supply chain, just wanted to set the context here, is that food manufacturers sell over 60% of their output to Canadian grocery stores and restaurants. And of course, it's really important that we do work very closely with Canadian farmers to provide some of the safest, best food in the world. And we do know that internationally, certainly there are a lot of countries who are willing and do pay a premium for the products that we make together. But the challenge we have is this. We only add value to about 50% of what we grow in Canada. So we're really good at exporting our primary products, and then we buy it back for 20 times the cost. Well, that's not a good economic model for this country, or any country. There is an opportunity for us to work closer together for those made in Canada products. And it was interesting at the Canada Ag Day yesterday, and I know Mary participated as well there, and Dominique Barton, and the minister, and from Credit Canada, is that talked about the importance of the need to cooperate, work closely together, and many also called out the lost opportunity to provide more of that value here in Canada. And on the next slide there, I just like to provide some context on what we've been doing during COVID. It was an extremely busy time for all of us. But a couple things highlighted here is what our member companies, we did several surveys throughout the pandemic, and our members' contribution to both keeping workers safe, but also keeping production lines running. Our members invested millions in order to keep workers safe, and they implemented employee engagement and appreciation initiatives. They had to increase, which was really important, that training to comply with the health and safety protocols. And they also increased over the last year wages in food manufacturing. If we look at Stats Canada, wages in food manufacturing increased by 16%. And then there was also change during COVID on how and what our members produced, which was interesting. So we saw that there was a huge demand, increased in production for some products. And there was about 30% of our members experienced a 200% increase in orders. And some experienced an increase up to 500%. And I do know that there are some product categories that continue to have a lot of strain, and it's difficult to keep up. For example, in the snack food area. And that's not just stats coming from my household. But there were also changes made to production lines as well. The spacing, the plexiglass, in order to keep those production lines running, which were important, and they were costly. And on the next slide, we look at the ongoing challenges. So this is what the last slide talked about what our members did. And then now we're talking about the ongoing challenges and really the impact. I can say that the ongoing and COVID-related costs still continue to this day, and I'm sure they do for the entire value chain. There is continues to be a drop in productivity. We know that early days in the pandemic, we saw 50% reduced productivity according to our member companies, and some of these effects still linger today. And as Randy touched on, we are concerned about the economic sustainability of our customers, restaurants, food service, hospitality, etc. I mean, we rely on our customers to keep us operating. And also, one of the things that we find challenging is the grocery landscape. Getting that product placed on a store shelf has been a difficult process, increasingly so during the pandemic, as our members have been very strained in keeping up with orders and deliveries. Labor continues to be a big challenge. I know that's one of the priorities of Mary and team at CFA, and I think that will continue to be so. And then just finally is one of the things that keeps our member companies up at night, and certainly us at FHCP, is that the worldwide repatriation of manufacturing. So it's not just here in Canada that we're having those conversations about the need to increase self-sufficiency, as Randy commented, that we didn't do such a good job with vaccines or PPE. And I think that there's that political will right now to move forward with this, but Canada's not alone here. We have countries all over the world who want to do the same and attract manufacturing to their countries, and especially if we look at south of the border, the Buy American and America First agenda continues with this Biden administration. Now, next slide, because I am an optimist, is a silver lining. I think that if we look over the past year, I would say that there has been an increase in awareness with the government and with media about how our industry works, how our supply chains work, how the border works, why we need the border to be open, why we need essential workers. Who are these essential workers? They are engineers who fix our facilities. They are temporary foreign workers. And also the interdependence of our entire value chain and interdependence with North America and the world. So I think that is a silver lining. Also, silver lining is that we finally got that formal designation as critical infrastructure at the federal level and at the provincial level as essential business. I think that it didn't come soon enough. There's a couple months there of really trying to get the government to formally designate us as such, but that helped clarify how we operate. I know we'll touch on this later, but the increasing focus on food insecurity is important. We saw that in the Minister of Agriculture's supplementary mandate letter, which was added, that the importance of food insecurity and the need to address this. What we saw as well early in the pandemic, as I referred to a couple slides ago, is that political will to increase self-sufficiency. We saw the former Minister of Innovation, Science, Economic Development, Minister Baines, talking about the need to increase self-sufficiency here in Canada, and those conversations are continuing. And also along those lines is that commitment to build a world-class manufacturing sector here in Canada. So let's not depend on those other countries to make our PPE, vaccines, and food products and other critical essential products. And then just finally, lots of recognition in various documents across government and by ministers, by opposition, the recognition of the agri-food industry as a key to economic recovery. And I think that is a cross-party recognition and acknowledgement, and I have not met anyone who disagrees with that. My final slide is I just wanted to talk about a recent report and the relevance of it to today's discussion. Back in May, the Prime Minister appointed a private sector advisory board to provide counsel to the government on the post-pandemic economic recovery. And so it was made up of the chairs of the economic strategy tables. So a lot of smart people around the table. Back in December, they released a very well thought through report. And one of the key recommendations in that report is that Canada needs an industrial strategy that builds on our core strengths and leverages our agri-food advantage to feed the planet. And I point this out specifically for our sector, allows Canadian players to capture a larger share of value from processing activities. Now, what's key in this report is that agri-food was identified as one of 4 key pillars to rebuilding the economy. And it's essentially, this document is a blueprint for Canada's economic reform and recovery. Now, I would say that not only were there smart people around the table, but I think that the process of consultation for this document was sound and solid. We certainly had the opportunity to contribute to this report and provide our input, which we appreciated. We are pleased with the recommendations in this report, and we certainly hope that government does move forward in implementing these recommendations and not reinstating, but continuing the really good work of, for example, the economic strategy tables and all of the excellent work that Murad has done on specifically the Agri-Food economic strategy table. And on that, I will pass it back to you, Randy.
Carla, thank you. Very interesting thoughts and comments. I appreciate your optimism, your silver lining. I completely agree with you on the potential of the future here, and look forward to some questions on these topics in a few minutes. Next, I'm going to invite Gary Sands to our stage screen, and Gary has some more comments and thoughts to share with us this afternoon. Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Randy. I won't have a lot of slides to show, but hopefully in the questions and answers we can get into some of the details of some of the things our perspectives we've shared over the last year, and certainly a lot of the points that Carla touched on we would certainly support, and we've gone through the same experience. So just so you can see on the first slide, it gives you an idea of the grocery sector at a glance. And I should begin, first of all, I do want to also thank CFA for the invitation to participate today. And just again, CFIG, we're a national association. We were established in 1962. We represent independent, franchised, and specialty grocers in Canada, and we also have members who are independent wholesalers and distributors. In fact, 2 of our members are the largest wholesalers distributors to Indigenous communities in Canada. CFIG, we deal with a wide range of issues. I'm sure every association does, obviously, but in addition, we also run the 2 largest combined retail trade show conferences in Canada, one in Vancouver, one in Toronto, and the largest part of that is showcasing local, which we define as provincial. This has been a challenging time from our perspective, unprecedented time. Also from the standpoint of the independents, heavy expenditures or investments, if you want, into PPE. No help from government from us for that, and we certainly don't offload those costs onto the suppliers. There's definitely been some challenges, and we want to talk about in this session and going forward some of the changes that have taken place. There has been some silver lining, as Carla talked about in some of them, and we think we can unleash, back to the topic of the discussion today, some of the some more potential that we think we have downstream in our industry. Maybe if I can move to the next slide. And that just gives a bit more of a breakdown in terms of market share. It's a little bit understating from our member standpoint our market share, because that is an independent study that we had, pardon the pun, economic study that we had that shows just the pure independent grocers. So it doesn't include The specialty stores, for example, does not include the independent distributors or wholesalers. And another thing too that we have been pointing out aggressively to governments, and I think it's starting to get through to them, and I say federal and provincial, is that independent stores are in a myriad of rural and remote communities in Canada where they're the only game in town. There's no chain, and there never will be a chain. The market is just not big enough to support it. And one of the challenges that we found over the last few months in particular was the issue of fair supply. And you note I'm not using the word equal supply, but fair supply. And when we have a problem in those communities that I mentioned, the rural and remote communities, and getting fair supply, then that means in turn those communities have an issue of food security and also fair pricing. We've seen those issues over the course of the last 2 months. Fair supply and fair pricing have been brought forward as significant concerns on the part of our membership. And we can talk about that a bit more in terms of what we see as the solution, some of the solutions for that. If I can move to the next and final slide for me. Again, it's just giving you a bit more of a breakdown of the sales. This data is about 4 years old now, so we're in the process of updating this with a new economic study. But we're closer to 20 billion now if we included the independent and the specialty and some of the changes that have taken place in the industry. In terms of our membership, we're closer to 20 billion in market share. Again, that's it for me. I just do want to hopefully get into some of the perspectives of our members in the next few minutes. As everyone I'm sure knows, retail grocery, chain and independent, operate on very narrow margins, about an average about 1.5%. So some of the changes, the increased requirements for expenditures on PPE, the explosion in online and curbside pickup, which means higher costs actually for us, has been a huge change. And the last change, and for us, this is back to that silver lining that Carla touched on. For us, has been the huge increase in buying local. And for the independents, and I'm not saying this because of where I work, buying local isn't just a slogan for the independents. It's their DNA. They have to. It's their way of differentiating between themselves and the competition. So this is a change we very much welcome on the part of the consumer. We hope to see that increase in buying local become permanent. We buy local, we shop local, we live local. We live in the local communities that we serve. So this is one that we think will really help our members in terms of their capacity or their ability to compete, but also unleashing, back to the topic again, unleashing our potential. That's it for me, Randy. And like I said, I'm happy to get into more details on some of these issues and talking about, some examples of, for online, I do want to make sure that people understand, even for online, the significant cost increases that result to our members from those new platforms. So again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Gary. Again, great points, great comments. It really is staggering when you look at some of those numbers you shared at the size of the Canadian grocery retail industry. And certainly when you put it all together, we take our food service and our retail, we put the manufacturing organization, I think Carla mentioned, the manufacturing industry. Carla mentioned the number one employer or number one number of jobs across Canada. Food service is number 4. The restaurant industry is number 4. You put the grocery retailers in there. I mean, it's just a massive. We employ the majority of Canadians in our supply chains. It's real. Now, I do want to make a couple of comments, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions. This notion of the cost Gary referred to on online, curbside, we'll call it non-efficient ways to move product efficiently. There's such an opportunity in front of our industry. Has gone through the same thing. The restaurateur loses money when they take an order online and put it in a, we'll call it a delivery app vehicle for a home delivery. But they have no choice. They need to keep cash flow going, and it's the only way to participate. We've got to find ways in food service to improve the efficiency and the return on that channel, because here's the truth. Consumers aren't going back completely to being in person. In groceries, another example. You think of all the years the grocery online channel was promoted, and just it didn't take off. It's now mainstream for so many people. And I know the grocery industry, they will find, Gary, the industry will find its way to drive out expense and provide some efficiencies there. But at the end of the day, I do believe the net cost will be higher. And it's something we all have to kind of get our head around. When you think about all Canadians driving to a grocery store, walking inside, you're enabling a lower cost model of distribution by doing that work yourself. The minute you have it delivered to your home or for curbside, you've transferred your own personal cost into the store, and it's quite interesting. So we all should think about that. Up on the screen, we're going to move to our Q&A. Up on the screen, you can see we have Q&A instructions, and really what we'd like to encourage you to do is put your name and your organization in your question so we can address you properly. And as well, if you'd like to put my name or Carla's name or Gary's name, if you'd like one of us to answer the question, we certainly can address it that way. And so with that, I open up the floor to questions. Oh, and one other thing, I did mention this earlier. Matt Houston will be reading the questions to us as they come in.
Yep, the first question is from Melody Garner-Skiba from the Canadian Sugar Beet Producers, and it's for Randy. With the emerging trend of Made in Canada, how do your food experts convey the Made in Canada message when it includes products that may be seen as controversial, such as antibiotics in livestock and biotechnology in crops?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, here's how I will open up a dialogue on this. I don't think there's any right answer, but I'll say this. When you talk about crop science and food science, the public and the public's knowledge of that information may not always be at the, we'll say, the right level of understanding. And I actually believe we need to do more as an industry to rightfully and accurately educate our citizens, our consumers, on all the different components of food science. And those components you referred to are a few areas where that's important to do. A few years ago, I spent some time with the Canadian beef producers at their annual conference out in Western Canada. And it was a national conference. And we talked about how to market Canadian beef differently. And it was quite interesting that, simply having good science is not enough. We need to talk about the product and talk about the benefits of science and the benefits of not having up-to-date science, and balance that with an understanding. And I do believe that's what we need to do more of across Canada to get to a better place and balance the consumer's expectations. Great question. Carla, do you, yeah, go ahead. Carla.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here too. So I think science-based decision-making and regulation is absolutely essential for our sector. And I would just, it's important to note that while we do complain sometimes about Canada's regulatory system as not being agile and flexible and responsive enough, we're fighting for, I don't recall, I think it's first place, according to several years ago, a Conference Board of Canada study that we're one of the safest, with the safest food in the world. Because it is based on science. It is based on science decision-making. But I would just say, going back to Randy's point, I think that there is a real disconnect. I think the world of science is very much misunderstood by a lot of Canadians, and I am not a scientist. But I think that education and communication to Canadians and to government as well is important. But I think that our regulators here in Canada and Health Canada and CFIA do a really good job of following through with science-based decision making and making sure that only products that are safe are in store shelves.
Great comments, Carla. Thank you.
The next question is from Isabelle Bouffard. I believe this is for you, Randy. You mentioned the consumer's craze for Canadian products. How do you plan on ensuring that these products are available in your networks? And how do you envision their identification in distribution networks, in food services and restaurants, as well as in grocery stores?
Great question. And I'll address the food service side of this first. So in other words, the food away from home channels. We're really, as an industry, myself, my competitors, we're a function of what our customer demands are. So as you and all of you are consumers to the restaurant, waving your flag about wanting some information on origin of product is what you should do. And I think most of us do that in our favorite restaurants today. That's has become a real phenomenon in recent years. That works upstream into companies like Sysco, where we're being asked for more Canadian products, more provincial products, more local community products. And with that, we go out and source those products. Now, we have systems that we've evolved recently in recent years where we're able to store the data, the information about those products inside our system. So our customers, when they shop with us, they know where their products come from. They can pull down that information and have it readily available in the restaurant. If they want to promote it because they feel their clients need to see that, they can do that. We encourage that to happen at the restaurant level. Because we're a provider of services, we don't force that, obviously. We're an organization selling products, but it's up to the restaurateur to feel compelled to do that. So I come back to it again. As consumers, we need to ask for that information in a clear way, and it goes back to the supply chain to make that data available. Now, there's one other piece. Large organizations and small organizations in Canada have differing degrees of advantages based on where their products come from and based on their size and scale. And I say this, Carla mentioned this, our Canadian system on regulation is one of the most efficient. As bureaucratic as it seems, it's one of the most efficient. We are also working on ways to give more information and make more information available to every barcoded food product in Canada. And this is a plug for an organization I work with, GS1, and we're the regulator of the barcode and the codings and standards of the Canadian industry. And we are making data such as local data, origin data, image data available right across Canada. And this is one way we're facilitating information to flow quickly and freely for you as a consumer, whether it's in a restaurant or in a grocery store, into the future. Carla, you have something to add?
Yeah, I'll just add in about that. The kind of the labeling of the Canadian products with the products on store shelves. So we did have those Product of Canada labels, which under the Harper government was kind of revamped. That I think before I would say that they were too lax and they didn't really mean anything, and then they turned complete opposite ways and became so restrictive. I think it was 98, 99% domestic content, which meant that several of our member companies who did provide the main ingredients in a lot of products just had to start tearing off the label. I know in particular one of our member companies had to tear off the label, and they were being called by a lot of their customers to say, what is this? Are you no longer sourcing Canadian? They said, yeah, we are, but it's there's 3% foreign content in here. So it rendered it meaningless. And I'm pleased to see the government kind of moving towards changing that label. It does have to have some flexibility, of course, because we don't grow everything here in Canada, and also some flexibility that sometimes companies need to have. The flexibility of sometimes you can source from Canada and sometimes you can't, depending on the crop year. But I think that it would benefit, farmers, food manufacturers, and the whole value chain if we can reflect. I mean, if the product has primarily domestic ingredients, I think Canadians should know about it, and it should be clear enough that they understand.
Thank you, Carla. Good comments. Gary, would you like to add?
Yeah, I guess other than I echo a lot of the comments about signage. I guess I'd like to get on my soapbox for a minute just about the made in Canada from the independence perspective. And one of the issues, and this is what we're hoping comes out of more of the dialogue that's afforded with opportunities like this panel that's been set up today with CFA, is what can we do together better? What ways can we promote the made in Canada products, the local producers, processors? What can we do to get more of those products in the shelves of our grocery stores from our members? I just have to stress again to all the people that are watching and listening, our members, they want to have made in Canada products on their shelves. They want to differentiate. They're willing to test new products, and they'll act as the term they use is incubators for new products. They want you and them to connect. And just before I still on the soapbox, I mean, I mentioned before, we have 2 large trade shows in Canada that we run, actually the largest for retail grocery. And we go out aggressively trying to get local Canadian small and medium-sized producers and processors to come to the show to meet with our independent retailers. You guys should be knocking down our doors. You guys should be pushing those doors down to get in front of those retailers. There's a $20 billion market out there. Let's connect. So I guess from my standpoint, one of the frustrations we have is that we talk about what we need to do, but we need to do more of that connection. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen come out of COVID is an increased dialogue, and hopefully leading to that, we'll see more opportunities for those made in Canada products to get actually in front of the customer on the store shelves.
Thank you, Gary. There's one other piece here that I do need to add. You know, I think all of us realize this more than anything. Canada is an extremely multicultural nation. And as our nation has become kind of a melting pot of cuisines, world cuisines, one thing we have not kept up with is made in Canada world cuisine ingredients. And so often we have to go outside of the country for our clients to bring in products that make up the world cuisine menu items or ingredient items that they need in their dishes. And I can tell you there's many communities that are frustrated by that. They want to buy from the country they live in and have grown to love, and they can't find the products. And I encourage you, where you sit, to ask yourself, what more can you do to look at different cuisine products and ingredients that you can grow, develop, manufacture in Canada? It's an absolutely enormous growing part of the food industry, and we're not meeting the demand in Canada as producers, as suppliers, as supply chain. Carla?
Yeah, just to build on Randy and Gary's points here, is that a couple things. I think, and made in Canada and local, it does not mean small. So I think, and that makes a lot of Canadians very uncomfortable. We like to have those very small local farms, certainly, or people, hobby farms, community farms, and whatnot. That's very different from reality. But I guess we do need, in order for us to supply more made in Canada products, we do need anchor companies that feed the entire supply chain, and then it helps support all of the small, medium-sized enterprises around it. I know Dominique Barton does speak a lot about that. We need foreign direct investment here in Canada. We need small Canadian companies to grow to get that scale, and we need that along the whole value chain. So local is not necessarily small, but it does include small as well. And then my second point here, which I think is really interesting, and in previous conversations, I know Randy, you touched on it, made in Canada and food, it's not necessarily price competitive with foreign products coming in. And so really the question is, I think that it's very important to have that choice in Canada, and I think we should strive toward that, but we should not place our values on that with other Canadians, because sometimes it does cost more, and good quality food made in a safe environment, environmentally sustainable, does cost more. But if we look in the context here, we have close to 9 million Canadians who applied for the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit because of COVID. And I can bet that they are not buying the more expensive option on store shelves.
Thank you, Carla. Okay, our next question. Matt?
The next question is from Keith Curry, and this goes to the whole panel. Carla alluded at the end of her presentation to the economic opportunities that lie ahead. If agri-food is to be that economic driver that we all know it can be post-COVID, where in the value chain do you see the best incentive and investment opportunities to benefit the entire value chain, including CFA members?
Carla, Gary, do you want to start or?
Yeah, sure. So what I guess the question is really what initiatives are needed to benefit the entire value chain? Well, I would just say a couple things. I think one of the things I would probably say, definitely my understanding and working so closely with CFA is that labor challenge and that labor piece. I think that we really need to make changes there in order to secure labor. And that is just not, the difficulty here is that we just can't seem to get Canadians willing to, interested in taking these jobs. And so we do rely on foreign labor. I would say that's number one. I would say, the second thing is really what we do need, which would benefit the entire value chain, is we really need to rethink of government priorities in terms of, supporting the value-added sector. I found it really interesting that in CFA's pre-budget submission for this year that they specifically asked for more support for food manufacturers. And that is because it benefits them. You can have the product at the farm gate, but if you can't process it, you're not selling to your customers, just as we cannot sell to our customers who are the, restaurants and grocery stores, food service, etc. So I just flag those couple things.
Thank you, Carla. And I'll just add, I think, frankly put, it's time for us as a national policy government discussion to think about how we provide incentives for Canadian manufacturing initiatives targeted specifically to some core, we'll say, subsectors of the food supply chain where we're falling short, and there's many. And, as more and more of these components have left the country and have moved south or even off North America to other points, it's time for us to really look at that again and say, is there some way we can incent business manufacturing to come back or at least relook at the Canadian option? And then to Carla's point on labor, we need a better approach to how we bring and support labor to support manufacturing. The gap is so enormous, it's so significant. Many of you know what I speak of, but our current government and policy, and I don't mean the current government in power, I actually mean our current government view in general terms is not conducive, is not supportive of what we really need here. And this goes right across the country, many sectors beyond food, but we really need to think about those two components, is my view. Great question.
Yeah, I think I would add to that from our perspective, one of the things we'd like to see more of is, I should put it this way. I think from my experience, from our sector's perspective, we as an industry have spent too much time talking about each other and not to each other. And I think we need to have more of a reflecting the spirit or the phrases we've all used during COVID of we're in this together. I'd like to see that continue to be reflected post-COVID. Let's start having more dialogue within the industry about some of the principles that we aspire to, some of the things where I think we can do a better job of working together. And I'll talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, we would like to see a grocery code of conduct in this country come out so that we're in a position to put on paper some of the principles that as an industry we espouse. And I want to make sure everybody hears me clearly. I didn't say a retail code of conduct. I said a grocery code of conduct. We feel very strongly that if we all subscribe to certain principles of fairness and transparency, those should be put down on paper as applying to everyone, not just some. Have independent grocers had problems with suppliers over the years, my friends? I'm sorry. Yes, we have, and it doesn't mean that we don't completely support the perspective of the suppliers with the penalties or fees or surcharges, whatever you want to call them, that have been levied on them. We sympathize and recognize the impact they have on innovation, on investment, on their ability to compete on pricing. Again. That's something that we believe will truly help us to unleash the potential that we have. It's let's develop that playbook for the future so that we have a better sense of what we all need to be doing the next time and post-COVID.
Thank you, Gary. Well, look, everyone, it is the end of our time together. I do want to thank Carla and Gary for their great presentation and comments today, and certainly all of you for your great questions. I know we have more questions that have come in, and what we will do is we will take your question and we will address them individually and get back to you. If you put your name and your organization in there, we'll be able to get back to you directly. So that's our commitment to you today. I do want to thank Mary and the CFA for allowing all of us to speak today. This has been really fun and exciting, and more than anything, I think, you know, I laugh a little bit and joke about my Foodies Unite movement, but truly, I do see a very optimistic and better future in front of us as we come out of the pandemic. And to Gary's last point, we need to work together in a better world as Canadians in our industry. We employ the most people. We have the biggest supply chains in all of our country compared to everything else. And we certainly owe it to our Canadian organizations and our Canadian citizens to be better in this space. So coming out of the pandemic, I can tell you the food service industry is very much better prepared if this were to come at us again. And certainly we'll work with government to keep our restaurants open faster than they did this last time. But to all of you, have a great rest of your conference. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla, Gary, and Randy. It's an exceptional panel. Really appreciate all the work that each of you put into your presentations and the meaningful dialogue you guys had and great questions from the floor. I think it's a fairly consistent theme we've heard through COVID. COVID has exposed some fragilities in our food supply chain, and I think that has in turn has highlighted just how important each link in that chain is. And you folks each represents those, at least a link each, and our membership certainly represents the beginning of that chain. So we do need to work together, and thanks for your presentations today, and thanks for your input. We look forward to more collaboration in the future. So have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, everyone.
And also thank you to Sysco. Randy, we appreciate Sysco sponsoring that panel, and thanks for that.